Abandoned on a dusty road with nothing but the clothes on her back, she never imagined a stranger's offer would change everything. A widower, 5 daughters, and a bargain born of desperation. But could duty become love? The sun hung low over the fields of Meadowbrook Valley, casting long shadows across the dirt road where Iris Whitmore sat with her back against a weathered fence post. Her dress, once a respectable shade of grey, was dusty and torn at the hem. Her shoes were worn through at the soles. She had been walking since dawn, though she no longer remembered why she had chosen this direction or what she hoped to find at the end of it. 3 days had passed since her stepmother had made it clear there was no place for her in the house anymore. Not after her father's death. Not after the will had been read, and every acre, every coin, every piece of furniture had gone to the new wife and her own children. Iris had been given a single carpet bag and told to leave by morning. She had left. Now she sat on the side of a road she did not know, in a valley she had never seen, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a hollow ache in her chest that felt deeper than hunger. The sound of hooves broke through her thoughts. Iris looked up to see a man on horseback approaching slowly, a wooden cart trailing behind him. The cart was full of small faces, girls, all of them, with tangled hair and wide eyes. 5 daughters, she counted. The youngest could not have been more than a few seasons old, nestled between 2 others, who held her steady as the cart rocked over the uneven road. The man pulled his horse to a stop a few paces from where she sat. He did not dismount. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. He was broad-shouldered and sun-weathered, his hands rough on the reins. A farmer, she guessed, a man who worked his land with his own sweat. "You lost?" he asked. His voice was low, careful. Iris swallowed the lump in her throat and shook her head. "No, sir, just resting." "You been resting here long?" She did not answer. The man glanced back at his daughters, then returned his gaze to her. "You got family nearby?" "No." "Friends?" "No." He studied her for a long moment, his jaw working as if chewing over a thought he wasn't sure he wanted to speak aloud. Finally he sighed and shifted in the saddle. "I'm Nathaniel Grayson," he said. "I own land about 3 miles west of here. I got a house, I got a roof that don't leak, I got a stove that works, and a garden that needs tending." He paused, his eyes steady on hers. "I also got 5 daughters and no wife to help raise them." Iris blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Nathaniel continued, his tone even, almost businesslike. "Their mother died 2 winters back. I've been managing on my own, but it ain't enough. They need someone to teach them things I can't. They need someone to braid their hair and mend their dresses and tell them stories before bed. I can't do all that and keep the farm running." Iris felt her heart begin to pound. She gripped the fabric of her skirt, her knuckles white. "I ain't asking for charity," Nathaniel said, "and I ain't offering it either. What I'm offering is a trade. You need a roof over your head. I need a mother for my daughters. You come with me, you take care of them, and you'll have a place at my table. A room of your own. Safety." The word hung in the air like a promise she was afraid to touch. Iris opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her mind raced. This man was a stranger. She knew nothing about him, nothing about his daughters, nothing about the life he was offering. But she also knew what waited for her if she stayed on this road. Hunger, cold, worse. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Nathaniel shrugged. "Because you're here. Because you got nowhere else to go. Because I'm desperate and I'm guessing you are too." It was not a romantic proposal. It was not even a kind one. But it was honest. Iris looked past him at the 5 little girls in the cart. They stared back at her, with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. The youngest sucked her thumb. The oldest, who could not have been more than 10, watched Iris with narrowed eyes, as if already deciding whether she was worthy of their father's trust. "What would you expect of me?" Iris asked. "Same as I said. Care for the girls, keep the house, cook when I'm in the fields, nothing more. And if it doesn't work, then you leave. I won't stop you." Iris felt the weight of the choice settle over her like a heavy cloak. She could stay here, on this road, and wait for whatever fate had in store. Or she could take the hand of this stranger and step into a life she could not yet imagine. She thought of her father. She thought of the home she had lost. She thought of the empty years stretching ahead of her if she remained alone. Slowly, she rose to her feet. Her legs trembled, but she steadied herself. "All right," she said. "I'll come." Nathaniel nodded once, as if he had expected nothing less. He extended his hand down toward her. Iris hesitated for only a moment before reaching up and taking it. His grip was firm, calloused, warm. He pulled her up onto the horse behind him, and she settled into place, her arms wrapping lightly around his waist for balance. The girls in the cart whispered among themselves, but Nathaniel said nothing more. The horse began to move, and the cart creaked along behind them. Iris looked back once at the spot where she had been sitting, at the fence post and the empty road. Then she turned her face forward, toward the west, toward the unknown, toward whatever this bargain would become. The Grayson farmhouse appeared as the sun dipped below the tree line. It was a modest structure, 2 stories of weathered wood with a stone chimney. A sagging porch wrapped around the front. Behind stretched fields of wheat and corn, and beyond those, a leaning barn. Iris took it all in, with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Nathaniel brought the horse to a stop near the porch steps and dismounted in one smooth motion. He turned to help Iris down, his hand steadying her as her feet found the ground. She murmured her thanks, but he had already turned away, moving to the back of the cart to lift the youngest girl into his arms. The other 4 daughters climbed down on their own, their eyes never leaving Iris. They stood in a row like soldiers awaiting orders, silent and watchful. "This is Iris," Nathaniel said, his voice firm. "She'll be staying with us. She's going to help take care of you girls, so I expect you to mind her." The oldest girl, the one with the sharp gaze, crossed her arms over her chest. "We don't need nobody to take care of us. We've been doing fine." "That's enough, Esther," Nathaniel said quietly. Esther's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. Nathaniel gestured toward the house. "Come on inside. I'll show you where things are." Iris followed him up the steps, acutely aware of the 5 pairs of eyes boring into her back. The door creaked as Nathaniel pushed it open, and the scent of old wood and cold ashes drifted out to meet them. Inside, the house was dim and cluttered. A table stood in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs. Dishes were piled near the stove, and a basket of mending sat untouched in the corner. Nathaniel set the youngest girl down, and she immediately clung to her sister's skirt. "Kitchen's here," Nathaniel said, nodding toward the stove. "Pantry's through that door. Flour, beans, preserved vegetables, chickens out back for eggs. Wells past the barn." Iris nodded, trying to commit it all to memory. "Upstairs are the sleeping rooms," he continued. "The girls share 2 rooms. There's a 3rd room, used to be for storage. I cleared it out this morning. It's yours." "Thank you," Iris said softly. Nathaniel looked at her for a moment, as if weighing whether to say more. Then he turned to his daughters. "You girls get washed up for supper. Iris will see what she can put together." The girls did not move. "Go on," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, they filed toward the back of the house where the wash basin sat. All except Esther, who lingered near the doorway, her arms still crossed. "You ain't our mama," she said, her voice low but fierce. "And you never gonna be." Before Iris could respond, Esther disappeared after her sisters. Nathaniel exhaled slowly, rubbing his face. "She's been holding things together since her mother passed. She don't trust easy." "I understand," Iris said, though her chest felt tight. "Do you?" Iris met his gaze. "I lost my father not long ago. I know what it's like to have your world torn apart." Something flickered in Nathaniel's eyes, recognition perhaps, or sympathy, but he only nodded and moved toward the door. "I'll be in the barn if you need anything. Supper don't have to be fancy, just something warm." Then he was gone, leaving Iris alone in the quiet, cluttered house. She stood still for a moment, listening to the muffled voices of the girls upstairs. Then she rolled up her sleeves and moved toward the pantry. The shelves were sparse but serviceable. She found beans, salt pork, an onion, enough for a simple stew. She set to work, her hands moving through familiar motions, grateful for something to occupy her mind. As the stew simmered, Iris tidied the house. She stacked dishes, folded mending, swept the floor, a way to prove she was not a burden. The girls came downstairs one by one, drawn by the smell of food. They sat at the table without a word, their eyes following Iris as she ladled stew into bowls and set them down in front of each child. Nathaniel returned just as she finished. He washed his hands at the basin and took his seat at the head of the table. Iris hesitated, unsure where she was meant to sit. "There," Nathaniel said, nodding toward the empty chair beside him. Iris sat. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the scrape of spoons against bowls. Then the second youngest girl, a small thing with wide eyes, looked up at Iris and whispered, "It's good." Iris felt her throat tighten. "Thank you." Esther shot her sister a glare, and the little girl quickly looked down at her bowl. Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Iris will be staying in the upstairs room. You girls are to treat her with respect. She's here to help, not to be your enemy." "Yes, Papa," the younger girls murmured. Esther said nothing. After supper, Nathaniel sent the girls to bed. Iris washed the dishes in silence, her hands trembling slightly as she scrubbed each bowl clean. She could feel the weight of the day settling over her. The strangeness of this place, the coldness of the children, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. When she finally climbed the narrow stairs to her room, she found it just as promised. Small, sparse, but clean. A narrow bed with a quilt. A window overlooking the fields. A candle on a wooden crate. Iris sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long breath. She had a roof over her head. She had food in her belly. She was safe. But as she lay down and pulled the quilt over herself, she could not shake the feeling that she had traded one kind of loneliness for another. Outside, the wind stirred through the fields, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and growing things. Somewhere in the house a floorboard creaked, and in the room down the hall, Iris heard the quiet sound of a child crying. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Dawn crept through the window, soft and grey. Iris had slept poorly, waking to unfamiliar sounds. The house settling, wind rattling shutters, but it was the memory of that crying child that kept her restless. She rose before anyone else, dressed quickly, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was cold, the stove dark. Iris rekindled the fire, her hands working with quiet efficiency. She had learned long ago how to move through a house without waking others. By the time the flames caught and the kettle began to hiss, she heard the soft pad of footsteps on the stairs. It was the second youngest girl, the one who had whispered her thanks the night before. She stood in the doorway, her hair tangled, her eyes heavy with sleep, clutching a worn rag doll. "Good morning," Iris said gently. The girl did not answer, but she did not run away either. She simply stood there watching. Iris poured water into a basin and set it on the table. "Would you like to help me with breakfast?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. "What's your name?" Iris asked. "Lily," the girl whispered. "That's a lovely name. I'm Iris." "I know," Lily said. "Papa told us." Iris smiled. "Can you fetch me the eggs from the henhouse, Lily? I'll need at least 6. Lily's eyes widened, as if she had been given a great responsibility. She set her doll down carefully on a chair and hurried out the back door, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Iris watched her go, a small warmth blooming in her chest. It was a start. One by one, the other girls appeared. The youngest toddled in, dragging a blanket behind her. 2 others came down together, whispering and giggling. Esther was the last, her expression guarded as she surveyed the kitchen. "Where's Lily?" she asked sharply. "Getting eggs," Iris said calmly. Esther's jaw tightened. She shouldn't be doing that alone. "Why not?" "Because she's scared of the rooster." As if on cue, the back door burst open and Lily came running in, her apron filled with eggs, her face flushed with triumph. "I got 8, she announced breathlessly. Iris took the eggs from her, careful not to let any roll free. "Well done, Lily. You're very brave." Lily beamed. Esther looked away, her arms crossed, but Iris caught the flicker of something in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, or grudging approval. Breakfast was simple: scrambled eggs, toasted bread, and cold milk. The girls ate without complaint, though Esther remained silent and watchful. Nathaniel came in just as Iris cleared the dishes. His hair was damp, his shirt sleeves rolled up. He smelled of hay and morning air. "You're up early," he said. "So are you," Iris replied. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the table, studying her. "You sleep all right?" Iris hesitated. "Well enough." "Liar," he said, but there was no malice in his tone. "This house creaks like an old man. Takes some getting used to." Iris managed a small smile. "I heard one of the girls crying last night. I wanted to check on her, but I wasn't sure if I should." Nathaniel's expression softened. "That'd be Nora, the third one. She has nightmares sometimes, dreams her mother's calling for her." Iris felt her chest tighten. "Does she come to you?" "Used to. Lately she just cries herself back to sleep." He looked down into his cup. "I don't know what to do for her anymore." Iris wiped her hands on her apron, her mind working. "May I try?" Nathaniel looked up at her, his eyes searching. "You don't have to." "I want to." He nodded slowly. "All right." The morning passed in a blur of work. Iris swept floors, mended a dress, weeded the garden. The younger girls followed her like shadows, curious and cautious. Lily asked endless questions. The youngest simply clung to Iris's skirt, thumb in mouth. Esther kept her distance, always watching but never speaking. That evening after supper, Iris climbed the stairs to the middle girl's room. Nora sat on her bed, knees drawn up, face turned toward the window. Iris knocked softly on the doorframe. "May I come in?" Nora glanced at her, then nodded. Iris sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. For a long moment neither spoke. Outside, the sky was deepening to purple, and the first stars were beginning to appear. "Your father told me you have nightmares," Iris said quietly. Nora's shoulders tensed. "He shouldn't have told you that. He's worried about you." "I'm fine." Iris did not argue. Instead, she said, "I have nightmares too, about my father. I dream that he's still alive, that he's calling for me. And when I wake up, I remember all over again that he's gone." Nora turned to look at her eyes wide and wet. "Does it ever stop?" "I don't know," Iris admitted. "But I think it hurts a little less each time, and I think it helps to talk about it, to remember the good things instead of just the loss." Nora was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Mama used to sing to me. When I couldn't sleep, she'd sit right here and sing until I fell asleep." "What did she sing?" Nora shook her head. "I don't remember the words anymore, just the sound of her voice." Iris reached out slowly and placed her hand over Nora's. "Would you like me to sit with you tonight? I can't sing like your mother did, but I can stay until you fall asleep." Nora looked down at their joined hands. Then she nodded. Iris stayed. She sat beside Nora as the room grew dark, as the girls' breathing slowed and steadied. And when Nora finally drifted off, Iris carefully pulled the blanket up over her and whispered, "Sleep well." She turned to leave and found Esther standing in the doorway, her face half hidden in shadow. For a moment they simply looked at each other. Then Esther stepped aside, letting Iris pass. It was not forgiveness, but it was something. The days found a rhythm. Iris rose before dawn, tended the fire, prepared breakfast. The girls grew accustomed to her presence, even sought it out. Lily followed her everywhere. Nora waited each night for Iris to sit beside her bed. Little Rose reached her arms up whenever Iris passed, wanting to be held. Only Esther remained distant, though her silence had softened from hostility into watchfulness. Nathaniel noticed. Iris saw it in the way his gaze lingered on her, in the small smile when Rose giggled in her arms. He no longer disappeared into the fields after breakfast. He stayed for a second cup of coffee. He asked about her day. He thanked her for small things. It was a fragile thing, this new life. But it was growing. Then came Sunday. Nathaniel announced they would attend church in the village. It was time, he explained. The girls needed to be part of the community again. People needed to see that the Grayson household was whole. Iris felt her stomach tighten. She had not considered facing the scrutiny of a village full of strangers. But she nodded. The girls were dressed in their best clothes. Iris brushed and braided their hair. Nathaniel wore a clean shirt and coat that smelled faintly of cedar. They rode to the village in the wagon, Iris seated beside Nathaniel. The road was dry and dusty, the morning sun warm. "They'll talk," Nathaniel said quietly as they approached the church. "I know," Iris replied. "Let them." The church was a simple white building with a tall steeple. Other families were arriving, greeting one another with nods and smiles. Iris felt every eye turn toward them. Nathaniel helped her down, his hand steady on her arm. The girls gathered around, suddenly shy. Iris reached for Rose, lifting the little girl onto her hip. A woman approached, older, dressed in dark blue. Her expression was pleasant but curious. "Nathaniel Grayson," she said warmly. "It's good to see you back." "Mrs. Fletcher," Nathaniel said, tipping his hat. "It's good to be here." Mrs. Fletcher's gaze shifted to Iris, her smile tightening. "And who might this be?" "This is Iris," Nathaniel said. "She's helping me with the girls." "Helping," Mrs. Fletcher repeated. "How kind of you, dear. Such a burden for a young woman. I do hope Nathaniel is compensating you fairly." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Iris is family," he said, his voice firm. "Not hired help." Mrs. Fletcher's eyebrows rose. "Family, how progressive of you." Before Nathaniel could respond, another voice cut in. Well, Nathaniel Grayson, I heard you'd taken in a stray." Iris turned to see a man approaching, tall and broad-shouldered, with a smirk that made her skin crawl. Behind him stood a younger woman, blonde and delicate, her eyes downcast. "Morning, Mr. Brennan," Nathaniel said, his tone cold. Brennan's eyes slid over Iris, lingering in a way that made her want to step back. "Is this her? The girl you picked up off the road?" Iris felt her face flush with humiliation, but Nathaniel moved closer, his presence a shield between her and Brennan's gaze. "Iris is a guest in my home," Nathaniel said evenly, "and you'll speak of her with respect." Brennan laughed, low and unpleasant. "A guest? That's what we're calling it now." He glanced around at the growing crowd, his voice rising just enough to carry. "Funny how a man can be so particular about propriety when his wife is alive, but the moment she's in the ground, he's bringing strange women into his house. Makes you wonder what kind of example he's setting for those girls." Iris felt the blood drain from her face. Around them, people had gone quiet, watching. Nathaniel took a step forward, his hands clenched at his sides. "You got something to say, Brennan. Say it plain." Brennan's smirk widened. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You're a widower with 5 daughters and no sense of decorum. Bringing in some girl you don't even know, letting her sleep under your roof. That's enough." The voice was small but fierce. Esther had stepped forward, her face pale but her eyes blazing. She looked up at Brennan with the full force of her young fury. "You don't know anything about Miss Iris. She takes care of us. She sits with Nora when she has nightmares. She helps Lily with the chickens. She makes Papa smile again." Esther turned to face the crowd, her voice trembling but determined. "Mama died, and it broke us. But Miss Iris is putting us back together. And if you can't see that, then you're blind." The silence that followed was deafening. Iris felt tears prick at her eyes. She reached out and placed a hand on Esther's shoulder, squeezing gently. Nathaniel crouched down in front of his daughter, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Esther." Esther looked at him, then at Iris. For the first time since they had met, there was no wall between them, only understanding. Mrs. Fletcher cleared her throat. Well, I think that settles that. She shot Brennan a pointed look. Some people know a blessing when they see one. Others are too busy stirring trouble. Brennan scowled but said nothing more. He turned and walked away, the blonde woman trailing silently behind him. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. Nathaniel stood and offered Iris his arm. "Shall we go inside?" Iris took his arm, her heart still pounding. Yes. As they walked toward the church, Esther slipped her small hand into Iris's free hand. And for the first time since she had arrived, Iris felt like she truly belonged. The weeks that followed the church incident brought change like the turning of seasons, gradual but undeniable. Word spread through Meadowbrook Valley about Esther's fierce defense of Iris, carried from household to household like seeds on the wind, and with it came a shift in the way people looked at the Grayson household. Some still whispered, of course. There would always be those who found fault where none existed, who clung to their judgments like armor against their own failures. But most began to see what the children had known all along, that Iris belonged there as surely as the sun belonged to the sky. Mrs. Fletcher visited twice, bringing preserves and asking after the girls. The women from the village stopped by with offers of help, though Iris suspected they came more out of curiosity than kindness. She welcomed them anyway, served them tea, and let them see for themselves that the Grayson home was filled not with scandal, but with something far more powerful, love, slowly and carefully built. The farmhouse itself seemed to breathe differently now, as if the very walls had absorbed the happiness within and reflected it back in warmer tones. Laughter echoed through the halls, where silence had once reigned like a deposed king. The girls sang while they worked, their voices bright and unguarded, teaching Iris songs their mother had once taught them. Rose toddled after Iris wherever she went, her small hand always reaching for Iris's skirt, her chubby fingers clutching the fabric as if afraid to let go. Lily had taken to calling Iris Miss Iris with such reverence and affection that it made Iris's chest ache with a sweetness she had never known. Nora no longer woke screaming in the night, lost in dark dreams of loss, and when she did stir, troubled by some passing shadow, she would pad quietly to Iris's room and climb into bed beside her without a word, simply seeking the comfort of another heartbeat in the darkness. And Esther had become Iris's shadow and her champion. The girl who had once glared with suspicion now smiled freely. She helped Iris with the cooking, asked her opinion on everything from mending to garden planning, and once, in a moment of unguarded tenderness, had whispered, "I'm glad Papa found you." But it was Nathaniel who occupied Iris's thoughts most deeply, in ways she had not anticipated and did not quite know how to name. He had always been kind, but now there was something more in the way he looked at her. His gaze would linger when she braided Lily's hair by the fire. His hand would brush hers when they reached for the same dish at supper. He found reasons to stay near her, mending a fence just outside the garden where she worked, sitting at the kitchen table long after his coffee had gone cold, simply watching her move through the routines of the day. One evening, as autumn began to settle over the valley and the air grew crisp with the promise of winter, Nathaniel found Iris alone on the porch. The girls had gone to bed, the house quiet except for the creak of old wood and the distant call of an owl. Iris stood at the railing wrapped in a shawl, looking out at the darkening fields. She heard his footsteps behind her but did not turn. "You'll catch cold out here," he said softly. "I like the quiet," Iris replied. "It's peaceful." Nathaniel came to stand beside her, his shoulder nearly touching hers. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was comfortable, familiar, filled with all the things they had not yet said. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel began, his voice low and careful, "about the day I found you on that road." Iris glanced at him, but his eyes were fixed on the horizon. "I told you it was a trade," he continued, "that I needed a mother for my girls, and you needed a roof. I made it sound like a business arrangement. Cold. Practical. It was what we both needed, Iris said quietly. Maybe, but it's not what we have now. He turned to face her fully, and in the fading light, she could see the emotion written plainly across his features. I don't know when it changed. Maybe it was the first time I saw you with Rose in your arms, or when Nora stopped crying at night because she knew you were there. Maybe it was watching you stand in front of that church and refuse to be shamed for something you had every right to be proud of. Iris felt her breath catch. What I'm trying to say, Nathaniel continued, his voice rougher now, is that you're not here because I need help with the girls anymore. You're here because I can't imagine this life without you in it. Iris's heart hammered in her chest. She had known, somewhere deep and unspoken, that what had begun as necessity had grown into something else. But hearing him say it aloud made it real in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. Nathaniel, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know this wasn't part of the arrangement. I know you didn't come here looking for this. But I needed you to know. I needed you to understand that you're not just some woman I took in out of desperation. You're... He stopped, searching for the words. You're the reason my daughters smile again. You're the reason I wake up and the day feels worth living. You're... Enough, Iris whispered, and there were tears on her cheeks now. You're enough. She reached up and placed her hand against his cheek, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm, the warmth of his skin. I didn't come here looking for this either. I came because I had nowhere else to go. But somewhere along the way, this became home. Not the house, not the safety. You, the girls, this family we've built together. Nathaniel covered her hand with his own, pressing it more firmly against his face. Then stay. Not because you have to. Not because you've got no other choice. Stay because you want to. I do want to, Iris said, and the truth of it settled over her like a benediction. I want to wake up in this house every morning. I want to braid Lily's hair and sit with Nora at night and watch Rose grow. I want to stand beside you and know that I belong here. Nathaniel's eyes searched hers, and then, slowly, carefully, he leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. It was not a kiss, but it was more intimate than any kiss could have been. It was a promise, a vow. A joining of two souls who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate griefs and built something new. Then we'll make it real, he murmured. We'll go to the church. We'll stand before God and everyone in that village and make it official. Not because we have to, because we choose to. Iris pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to be my wife, to be their mother, to let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Iris laughed, the sound half sob, half joy. You already do. And then she kissed him, soft and sweet and full of all the hope she had thought lost forever. He held her as if she were something precious, something to be cherished, and when they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. From somewhere inside the house came a muffled giggle. They turned to see 5 small faces pressed against the window, wide eyes gleaming in the lamplight. Esther grinned. Lily bounced on her toes. Nora clapped her hands silently, and Rose, held up by one of her sisters, waved with pure delight. Nathaniel laughed, deep and rich. Seems we've got an audience. Iris wiped her tears and waved back at the girls. Seems we do. The wedding took place a month later, in the same white church where Iris had been humiliated and then defended. But this time there was no judgment in the eyes of the congregation. This time there was only celebration, genuine and unrestrained, the kind that comes when a community recognizes that they are witnessing something rare and precious. The morning had been a flurry of preparation. Iris wore a dress borrowed from Mrs. Fletcher, simple but beautiful, with lace at the collar and cuffs that caught the light like frost on winter grass. Mrs. Fletcher herself had helped Iris dress, her capable hands fastening each tiny button with care, her eyes suspiciously bright. The girls wore ribbons in their hair, each one tied by Iris's own hands that morning, while they giggled and squirmed with excitement. Even little Rose had a ribbon, though she kept trying to eat it until Esther gently redirected her chubby fingers. Nathaniel stood at the altar in a freshly pressed suit, his hair combed back, his hands clasped in front of him to keep them from trembling. His eyes never left Iris as she walked down the aisle, Esther and Lily on either side of her like honor guards, their faces solemn with the importance of their role. Behind them came Nora, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers they had gathered that morning from the fields, and at the end of the procession, held in the arms of a neighbor, came Rose, waving at everyone with delighted enthusiasm. The minister spoke of love and commitment, of vows made before God and community, of two lives becoming one. But Iris barely heard the words, though she knew they were beautiful and right. All she could see was Nathaniel, the man who had offered her shelter when she had nothing, the man who had somehow become everything. All she could feel was the rightness of this moment, the sense that every step she had taken, every hardship she had endured, had led her here. When the minister asked if she would take Nathaniel as her husband, she answered without hesitation, "I will." And when Nathaniel slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she felt the last piece of her broken heart fall into place. The celebration afterward was modest, but joyful, filled with the kind of warmth that comes not from expense, but from genuine affection. Neighbors brought food, pies and roasted chicken, fresh bread and preserves, cakes studded with dried fruit. Tables were set up in the churchyard, covered with cloths that fluttered in the gentle breeze. Music played, a fiddle and a guitar, and someone sang an old ballad about love found and kept. The girls danced in circles, laughing and shouting, their ribbons streaming behind them like colorful banners. Esther, usually so serious, spun until she was dizzy and collapsed giggling into the grass. Even stern old Mr. Whitmore, who had barely spoken to Nathaniel since his wife's death, came forward to shake his hand and wish them well. And when the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, and the guests began to depart with warm farewells and promises to visit, the Grayson family, now whole, now complete, now bound by more than just circumstance, returned to their farmhouse together. The wagon ride home was filled with contented silence, the girls nestled against one another, exhausted from excitement, while Iris sat beside Nathaniel, her hand in his, watching the familiar landscape of her new life roll past. That night, after the girls had been tucked into bed and the house had grown quiet, Iris stood once more on the porch, looking out at the fields bathed in moonlight. She was no longer the lost woman sitting by the side of a dusty road, waiting for a fate she could not control. She was Iris Grayson now, wife, mother, home. Nathaniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "About how far I've come," Iris said softly. "About how a single moment can change everything." "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Any of it?" Iris turned in his arms, looping her hands behind his neck. "Not a single second." From inside the house, Rose's sleepy voice called out, and Iris smiled. "I'll go. We'll both go," Nathaniel said. And together, they went inside. The farmhouse settled into its nightly rhythms. Somewhere, a floorboard creaked. Outside, the wind stirred through the wheat. And in the small room at the end of the hall, Iris sat beside Rose's bed, humming softly until the little girl drifted back to sleep. Nathaniel watched from the doorway, his heart full. They had started as strangers brought together by desperation, but they had become something far greater. They had become a family, not by blood, not by obligation, but by choice. And that, Iris knew, was the greatest blessing of all.